So, first coming to progression. Why is progression important? Why do we need to know about progression? It's because we have these new treatment modalities which are available to us. Earlier, progression was just okay, it's progressing, that's all. And at some point in time, we'll do surgery when the patient can't wear a contact lens. But now you can do something about keratoconus, you can arrest it, you can even reverse it to some extent. And I think that evolution has happened since 2000 because of cross-linking largely. And then you have these other new measures like intrapuntal segments, topography-guided surface ablations which are combined with cross-linking, and of course ICLs. Until recently, most surgeons currently were cross-linking only progressive keratoconus. So that is the reason it is important to understand progression, because you had to document progression to be able to cross-link. I think we've been doing that for a bit now, but there's a lot of change in thinking in the recent past, especially after certain meta-analysis which have come and some progressive trials which have come, which have shown that it not only arrests but also causes significant regression of ectasia, and we may be actually justified in doing it as a primary treatment. So what are the possible tools to define progression? A progressive drop in vision. These are what we normally use in clinic, Sometimes we just want to justify it. So progressive drop in vision, increasing manifest refraction, increasing cylinder acceptance, increasing keratometry progressively, which may be defined by either maximum keratometry or mean keratometry or difference in K, progressively decreasing pachymetry, or other topographic or tomographic indices as was shown in the previous talk. So you can pick up one and say, okay, this is increased or decreased. But if you go back and see the current literature, most of the studies have used one of these parameters to really define progression and to justify the use of cross-linking. They have used either from topography or tomography studies the steep K or the steep K minus the flat K, or the mean keratometry, which is the average of the two, and the corneal apex power, which is also called the cone location and magnitude index, and manifest refraction spherical equivalent. And the change is basically 1 diopter for Ks, and K mean 0.75 diopters, corneal apex 1 diopter, and spherical equivalent 0.5 diopter is what has been in most of the current studies defined as progression. But if you actually go and look at these studies, parameters, particularly if you study Kmax, which is really the most common thing people look at, it has been found that the coefficient of reliability of the Kmax is significantly lower in keratoconic eyes compared to normal eyes. So this cutoff of 1 diopter was decided based on normal eyes, but if you go and study the keratoconic eyes, the coefficient of reliability is actually 1.5 diopters for, say, a pentacam, or if you're using an instrument like a Tomy Cassia, which is the swept source OT, it would be 1 diopter. So if you don't have on a pentacam a difference, an increase of 1.5 diopters, you're not really justified in doing cross-linking if you want to stick to the criteria of progression. So what I feel is we often use many surrogate measures to just justify doing keratoconus, because in Heart of Hearts, we know that this is a safe procedure, it's effective, and we do see the odd complication, but I think that's more of an exception rather than the rule. Frequency, how often should you be doing these screening tests to see look for progression? So on an average, I think once in 6 months should be okay, but if you're dealing with a young patient, especially a juvenile, then you should be doing it more often, because we know that in 6 months they can suddenly progress a lot. Ideally, discontinue contact lenses for 2 weeks prior to every topography to eliminate warpage. We still don't know what is the best screening tool to document progression. So in spite of everything, it's always a lot of guesswork, and we often end up finding something to justify it as progression. At least that's what I feel. Okay, so that's about progression. What are the treatment modalities in keratoconus? Basically, the treatment of keratoconus is twofold. One is the anatomical stabilization or the shape stabilization, and second is the visual rehabilitation. So it's essentially these two things that we are trying to do when we are treating keratoconus. In anatomical stabilization, it's basically cross-linking, nothing else. So, of course, we had the standard epithelium off cross-linking, which has been in vogue for a very long time, and of late we've had some modifications of the procedure. Accelerated cross-linking has become popular, in which people are playing around with energy levels and reducing the duration. Basically, the problem with cross-linking, it's a very long procedure. So, they've managed to reduce the procedure. There have been several studies showing that it's almost as effective as the standard Dresden protocol. And then you've got transepithelial cross-linking, in which you're actually not removing the epithelium at all. Earlier with the epi-off cross-linking, we were using 0.1% riboflavin with dextran. And in that also people used to do transepithelial cross-linking by doing some kind of scoring of the epithelium so that the penetration of the drug would be there. But the newer drugs have a higher concentration of riboflavin, 0.25%, and they have certain additives like sodium erythritate and benzalkonium chloride, which help the drug to penetrate to intact epithelium. Only thing is you need to increase the exposure time, and you are able to cross-link. However, there have been studies showing that the effect of cross-linking is more superficial when you do transepithelial. Standard epi-off cross-linking is about 250-300 microns depth. Here it's only about 100 microns. So you do get a cross-linking, but at a different level. So there have been some authors who have been suggesting that actually both of these complement each other and actually work together, and you could actually do both in a keratoconic patient because they're really working at different levels. So the Dresden protocol, as we all know, we use energy of 3 milliwatts per centimeter square, epithelium off. The conventional riboflavin with dextran was being used 0.1% for 30 minutes, 1 drop every 2 minutes. And then UV radiation for 30 minutes with 1 drop every 5 minutes. Now there was a meta-analysis in 2012 by University of Calgary, and this was really the first meta-analysis to see the effect of cross-linking. They studied 34 cohort studies and 2 randomized controlled trials, and they have definitively shown that cross-linking produces statistically significant improvements in best-corrected vision, uncorrected vision, and all the keratometric parameters and the spherical equal outcome. The only outcome which did not show improvement was pachymetry, and we expect that pachymetry should come down with cross-linking. So there is no doubt that not only does it stabilize, it also improves keratoconus. So do we really need to document progression to offer the benefit of cross-linking to our patients, especially the lot that we know are going to progress, the younger lot? So, like I said, because this transepithelial is more superficial, and because we are not taking out the epithelium, many of the side effects or the adverse effects of cross-linking are absent here. The endothelial effects are virtually not reported with transepithelial cross-linking. So, a lot of authors are suggesting that this may be tried as an initial intervention for cross-linking for a keratoconus patient at diagnosis. And if you see progression, you can always take the epithelium off and do a standard cross-linking. That's about the shape rehabilitation, shape stabilization, visual rehab, intracorneal ring segments without the cross-linking have become popular. Topographic guided PRKs have been proposed by Kennel Collis and his colleagues along with accelerated cross-linking, and they've shown excellent results. And of course, people are also using toric ICLs. Dr. C. Ganesh will probably be talking about later in the day, along after a period of duration of cross-linking. So protocols are still evolving. There is no perfect approach. I'm just giving you what I think should be the right approach. So if you're dealing with a primary keratoconus, first time the patient has walked into your clinic, if it's a mild to moderate disease, it's an old patient, more than 35, don't cross-link, observe the patient for progression. If it's a younger patient, less than 35, you can go ahead and do a primary cross-linking, do a transepithelial cross-linking, and if you think that the patient is a candidate for intracorneal ring segment, go ahead and put that in as well. Moderate or advanced disease, you can't cross-link them, so contact lenses and observe the progression, and if it's really bad, think about a keratoplasty, preferably a deep lamellar procedure. If it's a progressive keratoconus, with a pachymetry more than about 430 microns, you can do the conventional epi-off cross-linking. It has been shown that the Dresden protocol works better than anything else. If you are using accelerated cross-linking, use up to 9 milliwatts energy for 10 minutes, and that again has been shown to be equally effective. Intracorneal ring segment topographic guided PRK can be combined if there is a significant coma or if the best corrected vision is less than 20/20. If the pachymetry is between 380 to 430 microns, use a transepithelial cross-linking using transepithelial riboflavin or epithelium off cross-linking with a hypertonic riboflavin or distilled water. This is controversial, probably not going to be as effective, but that's the only thing you can do for these patients if you want to cross-link them. Advanced keratoconus, of course, again you have to do a keratoplasty. Visual rehabilitation we already know. The only point is toric ICLs only for those patients who have good spectacle corrected vision and preferably 1 year after documented stabilization. If you are doing interval ring segments with cross-linking, always do the ring segment first or simultaneously. If you put the ring segment after cross-linking, it doesn't really show very good effect. Topography guided PRK with cross-linking, again some highlights. The package should be 450 after removing epithelium. Undercurrent the CLN cylinder about 70% and maximum of 50 microns of ablation. Topography guided ablation with positive cylinder ablation should be done with a smaller optic zone followed by cross-linking using the Athens protocol. There are many unanswered questions in cross-linking. Progression is still a challenge. Cross-linking and keratoconus. Importance of progression may be redundant is what I feel, especially with respect to an indication for cross-linking. And threshold for intervention has lowered and protocols and management approaches are still evolving, so we'll probably give a different talk next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rishi.